Guys, we're at JLC 2024, and I'm at the Duragutter booth with David. How's it going?
How you doing?
Good, man. We worked together on our East Providence project. We'll actually post that video here on the screen, and we worked with your square profile. So when we first connected and worked on that project, I was only aware of this one. And I had thought that, hey, this makes a ton of sense. Everyone wants a really square, modern profile. What better way to make it out of an extruded aluminum? You're not dealing with flexibility. And I remember we had a very long piece that thing would stay dead straight. But I'm very wrong. You have a lot of profiles. So what do we got going on here?
Yeah, the modern is actually not how we started. So I'm an architect, and I started to actually make a piece for an existing house that I was renovating that had copper-lined wood gutters, and we needed to match that profile and didn't want to do it in wood. So I made this original gutter, which is an exact copy of a traditional wood profile. So you can see that that's actually identical.
So what's interesting is you actually posted just the other day on Instagram about the traditional way to do this rake detail, which unfortunately, there's so many reasons as to why we can attribute that it's done wrong, but it's really because of just knowledge and understanding of how to accomplish that. Looking at the project, I understand wood, it can decay, it can rot, you're talking about copper lining, but what made you go from wood to, say, an extruded aluminum?
Yeah, so I actually got a price on fiberglass, which was the only alternative, and it was so high, I said, I think I could make my own extrusion for less of that. And I did, but once you make a die, you have to make a certain amount.
Sure.
So I had some to sell, and I started selling to contractors. And
so you made this product for yourself, right, because you were convinced that you could make a die for less expensive than the fiberglass,
right,
and that essentially turned into you making a product for yourself and then finding a market to sell.
Right, exactly. And then I thought about when I was making it, there's been a couple generations of it, and I said, if I'm going to make a die and sort of reinvent gutters, how can I solve every problem that gutters out, not just this sort of shape problem?
What are those problems?
Well, I think there's a number of them. So one is the flexibility, like that they get crushed with ladders and stuff like that. So it had to be super stiff. The other was that I wanted a system that people could execute without very special skills. So the idea was that with extruded aluminum, you have these.
I had no idea there was a seam there.
Yeah, so these extrusions. And so it's a system of hidden fasteners, because what I don't like about a roll form metal gutter is that the corners are all outside, and so they don't look like a true wood gutter. And so all the fasteners are hidden. So that's one piece of it, but once you're making grooves, you can do other things too. So a key thing is this upper groove, which allows us to have a flashing that locks in, goes up and onto the roofs, and then gets counter-flashed with ice and water shield.
So that's actually, I love that detail, because in East Providence, we did that. We had some custom flashing made and actually snagged onto that. And I think about traditional gutter installs is that this gets applied to, say, a wood fascia board, and then when leaves and things build up, that fascia rots.
And it rot in the back.
Yeah, and it gives you the opportunity to really have this continuous,
And with this, you don't even need a PVC fascia because it's completely protected. But also the grooves allow you to have these snap-in accessories. So this is a leaf guard. We have a plastic and a metal leaf guard.
Is this your product?
No, this is actually an off-the-shelf. Our metal one is custom to us.
Yep.
It's an off-the-shelf. And so if you go to clean, which even with a leaf guard, you need to occasionally, instead of taking out a million screws, you just cop that out.
Yeah.
The other advantage of the extruded aluminum is, like, for instance, with the square shape, you can actually screw into this. So if you want to put in a traditional design, if you want to put a crown molding and have a hidden box gutter, you can just screw right into the top of the extrusion, and it's not going to, it's going to hold a screw.
So I see that you have a couple other profiles, but really quickly before we get to that, talk to me a little bit broad stroke on cost, because that's going to be a big question that comes up. Oh, it's going to be more expensive than, rolled aluminum. Of course.
Yeah, about 7 times more. So it's basically we're about $23 a foot for most of our standard profiles, and installed runs about $75 a foot. And we install, but we also sell to contractors directly.
So if I have my carpenters, they, what you said doesn't really require a lot of specialty tools.
Right, just a chop saw.
Yeah, so you're cutting this and everything is hidden fastener, your corners are pre-made, and then you're drilling for your downspout.
Actually, so this is a corner, so we don't make corners. This is just a corner shown because you're going to cut this in the field.
Yep.
But the way it works is you're just pinning it together with the corner pins. And then this is TPO roofing, self-adhesive roofing, that comes as 4 pieces of pre-cut tape. And so these are cut to this shape, and you're just going to peel and stick and put that in there, and that's your seam. So you're going to glue the joint together with the pins and 2P10, and then peel and stick the tape, and you're good to go.
So 2P10 is a fast drying, essentially adhesive.
Right.
David, I got to ask though, this right here shows no seam.
Right.
So is that for show purpose?
No, that's what they look. So if you look at our picture,
That's not painted after the fact.
no, that's
So that's cut. That is cut.
yeah, that might have been. I mean,
Maybe buffed
you
up.
might see a hairline. Yeah. So,
Okay.
I mean, I
Small hairline, but that, I mean,
so that's a field one right there.
Yeah.
No paint. Let's go.
you know, it really does look like a continuous piece. And I actually never gave that much thought when you think about
you were hidden.
sheet metal gutters, is that corner is on the outside and it looks as though it's applied.
Right.
It's a terrible look.
I think of it as a gutter is an exterior crown molding essentially, and on your
we've
interior
gotten some-
crown, you wouldn't put a piece wrapped around.
Right.
it.
And sorry to cut you off, but we've gotten so far away from gutters being an architectural moment that now they're installed and how do I get the water down the downspout as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
And one of the things I liked about your product is, and I see this done on an extreme level with the sheet metal, is that you see it go across the roof and it drops an inch to 2 inches, and it's like you need it for the water. We installed this stuff dead flat.
Right. Don't need to pitch it. Yeah.
Yeah, so no pitching. You're putting this is a true architectural moment on the home.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's really true. I mean, gutters used to be an integral part of the trim system, and this whole rake, miter detail, that the gutters wrapped continuously. You never saw an end cap.
Yeah.
And when they switched to aluminum roll-form gutters, all those details went out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And the key that makes this work, though, is this integral PVC block. Right. So we make this piece. This is cut to the pitch of the roof. This allows this to be a sealed corner. Water is never getting in here. There's no flashing in here, nothing. So, and we use that same block as an end. So if we're butting this into a wall, we don't even put an end cap. This is going to butt directly into the wall, just clean like that.
Yeah.
It's still sealed on the interior. If we have an exposed end, then we have a finished end cap.
You know, what I wouldn't say is like, yeah, you're paying a premium for this, but, you know, I've said it a couple times, but it really is part of the architecture and the design of the home. And I love the fact that you're doing it for the more traditional aspects of, you know, a roof line and what we see a lot here in New England.
When you look at the house, you see the roof, and your eye follows that line along.
And when it pitches
just
to, yeah,
does something nasty at the end. Yeah.
Gutters really aren't, you know, something that are celebrated, and when they are, it's typically a half round, and which are beautiful for the all intents and purposes, but they're not, you know, when you think about architecturally designed gutter systems, you're always thinking about, you know, integrated gutters or in the roof line, or, you know, we're actually discussing a project that we're building in Wellesley, potentially using the box gutter. But this is, you know, gives you the opportunity to be more thoughtful with that.
Yeah, the half round was really designed for like European masonry buildings. There's really not an authentic half round in American architecture. It's just been kind of tacked on. And what's sad is that often there's a crown molding, and then the half round is applied in front of that. It just buries the crown.
Yeah.
So really,
Wasted
more of an
craftsmanship.
afterthought. But the other thing we're excited about are these new profiles. So these are just our prototypes. That's how new they are. But this will all be in the same extruded aluminum. This is a wedge gutter. So here you've got the soffit, and then this is going up the slope. So this gives you a super crisp edge on a roof. This can either be built in flush with the wall, so you have literally wall roof and you never know there's a gutter there. Or they can be applied to the wall like this, and then you've got a little overhang with this super crisp edge here. So this is, you know, you can only really do this in extruded aluminum because it's strong enough to have this crisp edge.
So I'm holding a piece of PVC.
Right.
And so you said this is a prototype.
It's just a 3D printed prototype.
Got it.
that's being extruded right now as an extrusion.
Got it. So you in the beginning you said that the stock profile was $23 a foot or so. When you say stock, does that mean that there's an opportunity to do custom?
Sure. So we can also do custom extrusion. Like this is just a bigger extrusion, so these real big ones are going to be about 30.
Sure. Because of how much material.
Yeah, just more aluminum.
Yeah.
And also they have to put it through a bigger press.
Sure.
But yeah, we can also make shapes. So anything, we can design it, and we sort of know all the parameters of what can be extruded in aluminum. And we try to make everything with the exact same system of these grooves to hold the flashing and to hold the leaf guard, so that no matter what the shape is, it's still going to work as part of the same system with the same connecting pins and all that.
Sure.
So if you're familiar with installing one kind, you can install another. And then our other shape, our new shape, is this wedge. So here's your wall here, and then I got this
almost like a butterfly.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a really nice modern, like in a lot of the houses that I design, I'll do a upslope eave because it gives a kind of uplifting feeling against the sky. And this is a way of either continuing an existing slope eave or just really putting this right against a flat wall, and this is your detail. It's a nice minimalist detail, and especially at the mitered corner where it's wrapping around. So this can either work on a flat roof, pitched roof, doesn't matter.
David, when going back to the custom for a moment, what in terms of cost, when you get into custom, is there a huge premium to that?
So it really depends on the die size. If you're doing something about this shape, the die cost would be about $3,000. A bigger shape like this, it could be $5,000 or $6,000.
So you're essentially adding the die fee to an otherwise $23 to $30 linear foot.
Right, but if it's a great idea that someone has, that's a die that we can use on other jobs, then we'll eat that die cost.
That's fair.
It's a completely crazy looking thing. Maybe you own it. But
okay.
Yeah, we can use it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I know the project we're working on together in Wellesley is up for discussion whether it's going to be custom or not. But now I know the cost, so we can make that decision.
David, and then the last thing is just the radius gutters.
Yes.
Yeah. So these are.
So is this being done after the fact, or is it being extruded?
Being done after the fact, yeah. And we actually have a picture here of a nice. So there's a curve. We do a lot of curved porches and porticos and whatnot.
So is this done on? Is this like a mandrel press?
It's a big bending machine. Actually, the factory bends guardrails.
Okay.
So that's what they do. And they grab each end and they bend it around a form under 100 tons of pull. And actually, they don't heat it or anything. It just bends like that.
And no wrinkling or anything.
What they do, it's interesting you say that. They put a series of plastic slip sheets on the inside to pack it so that it doesn't crimp. So it's the equivalent of filling it with sand. Yeah. So they
and how tight of a radius can you get?
we can go down to about 5 feet. Okay. So pretty tight. Yeah, we've done some pretty tight little turrets on houses and that kind of thing. And it's just a great look. And with copper, it'd be faceted. There'd be a million soldered joints. It's really terrible. And it's not that terrible. Per foot, this runs about anywhere from 100 to 115.
For the radius part.
For the radius, yeah. So, I mean, if, most people, their porch is 20 feet, so it's not the end of the world. It's not like they're doing their whole house on this, And if you make more than one, it's much less because
of course.
You've already bent the thing, so yeah.
Well, and you heard it here, David said if it's an interesting profile, he'll eat the die cost. No, but in all honesty, I really appreciated working with you on our East Providence project, and it made a huge difference. I remember really thinking, you were really thoughtful in how this box gutter would work, and worked with us on the flashing details and making sure that, the issues that you hear about integrated gutters and the leaking and oh my God, what happens if this fails? You've kind of thought that through with all of these channels and the way the flashing all ties together. So that's appreciated. And to see that you're in, other profiles and then, truthfully, I didn't know about the custom until recently, and willing to do that custom, I think that gives you guys and anyone watching this the opportunity to really elevate their gutter.
This design actually came from an architect that was looking at this one and said, "Oh, I thought it was the other way." And I said, "Oh, there you go."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm definitely open to great ideas, especially for the contemporary shapes.
So if someone wanted to work with you or work with this product, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'll just go on the website, Duragutter.com, and I'm the guy, so they call
Cool.
me up, and yeah.
And you'll ship around the U.S.?
Yeah, we've shipped to the Caribbean, to Alaska.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long of a length?
26 feet.
And okay.
Yeah. And we actually can't extrude any length. It's more of a transportation issue. So
Well, even if, I mean, you think about it, you don't really see the seams.
Right,
So
yeah.
26 feet, I mean, that's a pretty good length.
26 foot, we used to make them 30. We found 26 was manageable for a pickup truck with a decent rack on it. Beyond that, it gets a little hairy. So that's how we came up with 26.
Cool. Well, enjoy the show. I appreciate you showing me it.
Yeah.
And I look forward to working with you in Wellesley.
Right.
Stay tuned to the next one. You nailed it.
You're the man.
You nailed it.
That was fun.